Welcome to Season 4, Episode 2 of South Nurse Podcast, Teacher Talks, where you get to know more about your teachers. I'm Amelia Wu.
And I'm Sarah Sun.
And in this episode, we interviewed Ms. Handler, a Spanish teacher here at Great Neck South High.
Hi, Mrs. Handler.
Hi, how are you?
Or should I say Senora Handler?
Senora Handler mejor.
So thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with us today. We have a few questions for you.
Sure.
So firstly, can you briefly introduce yourself?
My name is Gala Noemi Handler. I am a Spanish teacher at Great Neck South High School, and I'm also in charge of World Language Department and the ENL Department.
And why did you decide to start teaching Spanish?
I always loved languages, and when I started taking a second language, my dad wouldn't allow me to take Spanish. Because my first language is Spanish, I grew up speaking Spanish, so he said, oh, you probably speak better than the teacher. So he made me take French. So I took French, and I love French, and I took French throughout all high school, and I took it in college also. And I also attended the Alliance Française in the city. In the summers, I would go there to perfect my French. And then when I was in high school, I picked up Italian. So I went to Bayside High School, which is very close by, and they had a great language department, and I had great language teachers. So I took Spanish, Italian, and French in high school, and then in college I took Spanish, Italian, French, Portuguese, and Latin. So I studied many languages, and I just was naturally good at it, probably because, I'm bilingual, so my mind thought that way. And I just really enjoyed learning about different cultures. I just found it fascinating.
So previous to teaching at Great Neck South High School, do you have any other teaching experiences anywhere?
Yes, I do. My first job, which is back in the 80s, because I've been teaching for 37 years, believe it or not. I know I don't look it, but I've been teaching for 37 years. And my first job was in a college prep school in Manhattan, in the city. And I worked there for 3 years. And then I worked actually in a Catholic school in Jamaica Estates, which is in Queens, the Mary Louis Academy, which is a really good school, and I really enjoyed teaching there. I had my first child, and I stopped working, and I stayed home to take care of my son. And then I had another son. And in order to keep my finger in teaching, I tutored, which I really enjoyed. So I would tutor kids that were on homebound instruction. They were either sick or they got in trouble. And then I went back to teaching after my second son was born. And I worked in East Meadow High School. And then I worked actually in Roslyn School District. And then I worked in South Huntington for 6 years. And then I got my administrative certification, and I became a chairperson. I worked out in Miller Place, which is all the way out east. So then I worked in Syosset for a few years, and that was a crazy job. I was in charge of like 55 teachers, K through 12. So I got a job in Tarrytown, which is in Westchester County. So it was like a 3-hour commute from my house. I was crazy, but I loved the school. It was like a bilingual school. Everybody spoke Spanish because it's a big Spanish-speaking population there, and I enjoyed that. And I worked there for 2 years, and then I got the job in Great Neck South. And I have to say that this is the best job I ever had, because here the students are so wonderful, and I feel so grateful that I ended up here and I'm finishing my career here.
And what would you say were the biggest challenges and things you've learned from sort of working in so many different places and having all these different positions?
Well, I feel grateful that I had all these experiences, because from every experience I learned something, and every school was different. So from every place I took something and I learned something, so I feel that I had a much fuller experience, and I learned so much more by being in different places.
What do you think makes Great Neck South unique from the other places that you've taught?
I think it's the students. I think the students are wonderful. I've never worked with such great students that are so willing to work, and they try. I taught honors and non-honors, even the non-honors classes. I really have to say I never had a class that I did not enjoy at Great Neck South High School, and I'm very appreciative to the students, because I feel they're the ones that make the difference.
That's amazing to hear. So you previously mentioned that you're currently the chairperson of the
Yes.
language department, but also like
ENL.
ENL department. Right. So can you maybe talk about some of your duties as like the chairperson, managing those kind of two
Yes.
kind of separate departments?
So I have a lot of duties and a lot of work. But like I always tell my classes, the best part of my job is being with the students. That's the part that when I retire, I'm going to miss the most. I'm not going to miss the other stuff. I'm just going to miss my relationship and my connection to students and engaging students and getting them to love language and be interested in Spanish and challenge them. So my duties is I hold department meetings. I work on the budget, so I order materials. Actually, tomorrow I'm going for my budget meeting. I observe and evaluate all the teachers. Every teacher, I observe them twice. One is an announced observation, and then I have an announced observation. I also hire teachers. So when there's an opening, I'm always on the hiring committee.
So you mentioned earlier that you've learned a lot of different languages in high school and in college. So what made you specifically want to do teaching as your career?
When I went to Stony Brook, and when I was in Stony Brook, I was a TA there. I was a teaching assistant. So I taught a class. Actually, I taught an Italian class. And I really enjoyed teaching, and I did really well in front of the class. Like, I was like a natural teacher. And I felt very comfortable, and I was able to relate to students. And then also, being that I love languages, and I also love school. So, but in the beginning, it took me a while to get used to it. In the beginning, I had been in graduate school, and I was at a very high level. And when my first job, I worked in a college prep school. So it was kind of a lot of very rich, spoiled kids in the city. And, you know, a lot of times I'm like, oh my God, like they would make so many mistakes. I didn't understand. So it took me a while to get, that, learning a language is a process and it's very individual. Then I learned to lighten up and to take each student individually and just be there, to encourage them to grow their language proficiency.
That's really amazing to hear that you're able to use all your previous experiences and build on it and kind of like grow in your teaching career. So maybe like outside of your teaching career, what are some of your pastimes and hobbies?
Well, my class knows that I'm a crocheter and I love to crochet, and I love to create. I like fashion. I really like fashion, so I'll look at something and then I'll measure it and I'll create a pattern and I'll measure myself, and then I'll create a sweater like I created that Taylor Swift dress. So, but I did it to my body, like I measured, or I'll have a dress that I like and I'll measure it. One day I was home and it was a snowstorm. So I said, okay, I'm gonna start crocheting. So I love flowers, so I decided I'm gonna crochet flowers. And I kept on doing it until I finally learned and I mastered that, and then every time I challenge myself to do something different. So I made a flower, then I made a scarf, then I made a hat, then I made a bag, then I made a sweater, so I started making all different things.
That is so cool. I know you come into class, well, I'm in your class. You come into class every day, you look so fashionable, and you always have these beautiful sweaters, and I got to see the Taylor Swift dress in person. It was amazing. And also, you mentioned that you like to travel. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yes, I'm a big traveler. It's great because my husband is a general manager of a hotel for Marriott. So when we travel, we get the hotel free. So he works in the city, so a lot of people from abroad, they want to come to Manhattan. So he exchanges rooms with them. So like every year we try to do a trip. Like this past year, we went to Greece, and we went to 3 different islands, and we went to Athens. And we had been wanting to go to Greece since we first got married. We wanted to go there for our honeymoon, but we couldn't afford it. So finally we got to go. And I mean, I studied in Italy, I've been to Spain, I've been to Argentina, I've been to Colombia, I've been to Mexico. And still, that's another thing, when I retire, I want to have the opportunity. I have things on my bucket list. I also love to travel within the United States. So another thing that I want to do is I want to rent an RV and visit every state in the country. So even though I visited a lot, but not in the middle.
That is so cool. And would you say your global traveling experience has informed you as a teacher, given that you teach a world language?
Absolutely. Every time you're going to see, you're in my AP class. So a couple of years ago, I went to Galicia, to Santiago de la Compostela, and we're going to learn all about that. And that is a journey that people do in Europe.
Oh, like the pilgrimage?
The pilgrimage, yeah, it's a journey that they do. So I went to Santiago and I learned all about it, and I did part of the pilgrimage. So every time I learn something, I try to incorporate it into my classroom. Another thing, people always know me as Frida Kahlo, because when I taught 11 honors, I used to do a whole thing on Frida Kahlo, and and the students love Frida Kahlo. This last December, I went to Mexico and I wanted to go to Frida Kahlo's house, but I couldn't get tickets, so I was very disappointed. I went outside her house and I took all pictures from the outside, and I went to Coyoacán, that's where she lived. So I'm going back to Coyoacán. I'm gonna go to Frida Kahlo's house. I'm gonna do it. That's it. I told my husband, even if you don't come with me, I'm going.
And you're gonna get the tickets this time.
Yes, because we went during December, which is the holiday, so I have to go on an off time.
That's actually really cool, because like Frida Kahlo is totally one of my favorite artists of all time. Like
yeah,
exactly, like everything, because like in Spanish classes we usually do something about like the artist, the culture of like Mexico, and every single time I pick Frida Kahlo, and then Ms. Zafe is like, oh my god, you always say Frida Kahlo every time. I'm like, yeah, because like literally the best. So like
right,
yeah,
so I capitalize on that in my class.
That's amazing. So from your time teaching at South High, what are some of your best memories from this place?
I would say that my best memories are the students that I had and how appreciative they are. I find that they're very appreciative. Also, a couple of years ago, I also love dancing, which I didn't say, and I studied flamenco for many years. So I don't know if you saw me, but a couple of years ago I danced.
Yeah.
And I played the castanets for a concert. Yeah, so that was a really good experience, and that's another thing when I retire I want to do. I want to go to the city and take some flamenco dancing lessons, because flamenco is not like other dancing styles. Like ballet, you have to be very young, but flamenco, the older you are, the better. It's like fine wine.
And we have one final question. What is the best thing about being a teacher?
The best thing about being a teacher is I feel that as much as I give, I feel I get so much back from my students, and I learn from my students. And I'm always amazed, and I always tell my students, I learn so much from you. And I'm very grateful that I had this career, because I'm very happy in my career, and I'm glad that I'm going out on a high. Like, I don't feel like, some teachers, they get burnt out and they're unhappy. I'm not. But I'm still going to keep my finger in it somehow.
All right, thank you so much. So that's all for our interview today. Thank you so much, Ms. Handler, for having us here.
Okay, thank
you.
Thank you so much. This podcast is brought to you by The Southerner, Great Neck South High's newspaper. It is hosted by Sarah Sun and Lily Wu, directed by Amelia Liao, and edited by Janice Lee.